Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the Business of Creativity podcast, the unofficial podcast of the Graziadio Business School. I am joined today by Diane Singel. Diane is the Executive Director of Full-Time Programs Administration and Career and Professional Development. Greetings, Diane. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Ty. It's good to see you today.
I'm happy to have you on. Now, you've been here at Pepperdine for almost 20 years. You got some side business consulting you've been doing on the side for a few years. You attended University of Rochester School for Engineering, which, as you told me offline, that is one of only two schools with a specific type of education you received there. And you worked in engineering for around 6 years before making a switch to higher education. The question for me is, what is the one of only two programs that you learned there at Rochester that seems like you would come out as a valuable commodity or asset to the industry or business?
Yes, so it was engineering and optics. So I'm not making eyeglasses. I worked in the semiconductor industry in the chip manufacturing space. So we actually made the equipment to make the chips.
Oh, I need you now. What do you
I
mean?
know, actually. Now I'm a valuable commodity.
Right.
But yeah, so that's what we did. There's other types of work you can do in that space. The best way to describe it is it's a specialized physics in many respects is really what it is. So you could go to other schools and do physics and specialize in that area. But in terms of getting that particular degree, it's a minority of institutions that offer that.
So then you do that for 6 years?
I did that for 6 years. I built optics systems. I worked with clients. I ended up going to a couple of the fab sites and spent a lot of time in clean rooms. So it was interesting. It was fun. It was a good time.
So at some point, you make this transition from doing this super specialized, skilled work where the potential to make millions of trillions of dollars, and you decide to work in higher education. Tell me about that.
That wasn't exactly how my thought process worked. Yeah. Typically, you're working for a company, so the company walks away with millions and trillions of dollars.
Exactly, yeah.
No, it honestly was not intentional. I'll be completely honest. It was just happened. So I actually came to Pepperdine to get my MBA. My original goal for my MBA was I wanted to be that translator between business and engineering. My original goal was business people don't speak engineering, engineer people don't speak business. And so my goal was to kind of be that translator between the two and kind of merge the two as I work. I got out of business school and I could have returned to that company. I had an offer, but it was back almost the same role that I was doing before. So the company's awesome. And I just decided, I wanted to do something a little different at that time. Didn't know exactly what that was. So I worked on my own for a couple of years, doing some consulting work and working on more data analysis for mostly medical associations and such. And then I bumped into one of my professors who was running the MBA program on Peer. He's like, well, why don't you just come up? I needed more contact with people. It was very different than now when you work remote. Now when you work remote, you're talking to people, you're on video all day. Back then, you're
just doing the work.
Kind of isolated, and that just drove me crazy after a little while. So I came up, and it was actually a really exciting time to come up because we had just moved on to our Dresser campus. We were very small. We only had one program, which was only MBA. We did not have any specialty masters. Those didn't come along until 2008. So it was really an opportunity, and I was lucky enough to get the freedom to really explore. And I was able to work on pretty much anything and everything that touched the full-time MBA students here in Malibu. Everything from admissions to working on, we had, I think, 3 clubs when I started, 4 clubs when I started. That was it. But we had 4 clubs and they were just started. We had no structure, nothing. So it was really a great opportunity to be more entrepreneurial, to grow, and to really make a stamp on the program.
Which is excellent, right? And you've done a lot. So over 20 years, I mean, you probably can go back and identify, I remember when we were thinking about that and now it's implemented. That's excellent. So this optics engineering. Engineering is a profession and industry where you learn hands-on things and there's a specific way of thinking in terms of executing things as an engineer. and being trained in it and working in it for a time probably shaped your thought process on how you make decisions or handle problems or deal with people or anything. I wonder if there is still some of that. And I wonder if there is, how does that kind of tell me about that process and how it advised the way you do your work?
I think a lot differently, I think, is my perspective. I think a little differently than a lot of traditional higher education individuals, I think. I think it allows me to see a process from start to finish in a more objective manner, I think, just because it's just how engineering is. You look at it as a process. You're a widget, for instance. We're building widgets. But it allows me to really look at an operation when I think about a student life cycle, for instance. I am very visual on how I see a process. It has shaped my thinking. It's just how I naturally think from the engineering process operations perspective. It's just how my brain works. And I'm very visual in that. So for me, it is very clear to see how someone thinks about business school all the way to being an alumni and how all the pieces interconnect and complement each other along the way. So I think when I'm looking at decisions and how things interact, it allows me to, one, flip perspectives, because I do flip my perspective as to how a student looks at things too. So I look at both sides of it. I'm always looking at it from that end. But it also allows me, I think, maximize resources and allows me to think about when we're implementing things, try to not waste everybody's time as much as possible. Busy work versus not busy work. And how to fit the pieces together to kind of find that sweet spot. Because for us, the power is you have your academic piece, your career piece, and your student life piece. The real power of those three things, rather than treating them in silos, is where they interconnect in the middle. That's really the sweet spot and how you'll maximize your education here. And so I really try to figure out, how do we do that in a way?
In here, say those again: the academic, the career, and what was the third one?
Student life.
And student life.
And that includes clubs.
Right.
And the aspect of how a student lives their life really does impact how they show up every day. Just like I go home at the end of the day, if I've got stuff going on at home, it's going to impact how I do my work. And why would that be any different for a student? Students are not robots. They'll go home. I mean, a parent could be sick. A dog could be sick. I mean, it could be anything like that. Had a car crash. I'm not feeling well. How you live outside, student clubs, student organizations, all those things are kind of considered student life, but they all intersect as to how you're able to show up and really figure out, one, how to get people to see how they all intersect, but that's also tricky. And it takes a lot of time for people to do those things.
I wonder about those three things: academic, career, and student life. Do you have a kind of like philosophy behind each one in terms of the approach of the department that you are over? Can you touch on those? Are there any like operational principles or core type values behind each one of those, or do you have that type of thought? Or
well, too bad this is a podcast because I actually have whole diagrams on my computer.
Okay. Yeah.
Where how all the three circles interconnect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I don't it's not really true. I was going to say I don't compartmentalize everything. You kind of do, but you really look at how to leverage them. So for instance, I look at my role in the career. Part of the role of me and my team is to provide opportunities, to provide connections, to provide information that's industry specific, to evaluate skills students have to bring to the table for when they're looking at it. Now, if you think about the things I just said, skills, where does that touch? That touches your academic side of the house as well. Introductions to people, that brings in the clubs part and the academic, because they may touch it in a classroom. So it's really kind of, my philosophy is where we can leverage faculty, where we can leverage student experience, and then how we build those experiences. The academic is fantastic, and how do we leverage the faculty relationships? So my philosophy is really to look at it holistically. I'm a big believer of looking at the whole thing at one time. Something may fall in a bucket. That's one of those three areas. But usually they don't. It's usually not something that falls in one spot or another.
It almost sounds like you mentioned the diagram, which I haven't seen, but you may have wherever the overlap of the three is kind of where you focus to enhance and then expand out from there is what it sounds like you just described to me.
Yeah, that's where the power is. As I say, there may be certain things that we do that fall in two of them or fall in one of them,
right.
but the sweet spot is how you leverage all those three areas together. So it's funny because I'll have students that come in and I want a list of contacts. There's no magical list. There's no magical list that I keep in my drawer. But the reality is I do know a lot of people. My team knows a lot of people, and how we make those connections can usually they're alumni who are students who came before, who that's the beauty of 20 years is you get to know a lot of people and they're awesome. Our network works if you use it. And so they will tell us, okay, this person's falling short on this skill, so we can give the skill based. And so I really do look at where we can target that middle piece.
Right, which is important. But evaluating your success, right? Leading a department, evaluation is probably one of the most important things you can do, and letting people know how they will be evaluated. I wonder how you do that beyond what we see as students, beyond just people getting jobs and people getting internships. Like, how do you evaluate your success here?
Yeah, it's always hard for a career office because everyone looks at what percentage get jobs, what's the starting salary. Honestly, we have some control over that as to how we help students. I mean, but I think it's a mutual partnership. But that said, I do think that's part of it as to how we're succeeding on that. But I also think there's the element of we do surveys for students to say, are you actively searching? Are you happy with the person you're working with? What are the issues? And so we have some surveys we're doing now regularly that capture that experience for the students, because that's a big part of it. And the feedback's been very positive, actually. I think, we have a really great team of people who really are supportive. So I think getting that individual attention has been really helpful. So that is another success factor as to how we as a team are working together to help guide and coach and facilitate those relationships. And as I say, the feedback on that's been really strong. We do look at the number of opportunities that we do provide. So this year has been very unique because, the last 2 years have been very unique. On-campus recruiting has always been kind of an interesting element being in Malibu, but right now because of the pandemic, companies are still restricted to travel. And so they haven't been traveling for their recruiting for the last 2 years. And so we've looked at KPIs as to how many contacts we've had, and our actual contacts with employers have gone up over the last year because of the virtual element has been actually worked in our favor, I think, in terms of having opportunities at a lot of the larger companies because they don't have to travel because it's an expense item for them. And that's going to be an interesting thing in the future because already talking to the recruiters at the large companies, recruiting is not going to look the same. Yeah. It is forever changed because they're realizing the cost benefit analysis of, do I travel to the top 10 institutions and spend all of that money? Or do I hit 500 institutions, widen my talent pool, but do everything virtually? And so they don't have all the answers yet as to how the hybrid of that is going to play out, but they're already saying it's not going to look the same.
Yeah, it would benefit them to engage some of the MBA programs or MSHR programs to help them come up with solutions for that, so they're not trying to figure it out themselves, right? Go ahead.
But as I say, it's a good opportunity for us because we do have some really good talent, and now if students engage and are able to engage on these virtual elements, I know there's always that whole, well, we want them on campus. It's like, I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the way things are moving forward. It's very soon to tell, but that cost benefit, they're still on lockdown, a lot of the companies anyway, so they don't even know yet. They're still trying to figure out return to work schedules right now, but it is going to look different, but it's an opportunity for us.
One thing about that, and you and I had conversations offline where, depending on our perspective, you can see it as a benefit, right? Pepperdine is a smaller business school, right? Mm-hmm. Smaller class sizes, smaller classes in general in terms of whole classes, where someone who's looking at bigger MBA programs around the country are like, well, 10% of the people at this school get jobs somewhere. And so, that's 30 and 40 and 50 people. But 10% of here is a little smaller. And you mentioned that to me before. And I wonder how that positions Pepperdine Graziadio to use the lingua franca of MBAs to as a unique value proposition for students coming in, right? In terms of the smaller size, but then also for the recruiters who are potentially coming virtual or wherever, looking at the smaller size, but it's more of a concentrated type of MBA student coming out. Tell me how you guys are leveraging that or plan to in the future as something that could be a benefit.
Well, one thing that we do, we know our full-time MBA students. We know you guys. And so if someone tells us we're looking for somebody to do X, I can say, yes, we have someone. No, we don't. Most of the people who work with the MBA students would know that. And so that's a really positive. We're very personal getting to know you guys. We know you guys well. We are able to know your skills, who's working the system, who's not working the system. And the thing that's really cool about it is because we get to know you as students, 5 years from now, we'll know you as alums. And so when you're in a company, you're probably going to get a call from us saying X, Y, and Z. And that's how it works. And if you leverage that network, it works. You and I, when we were talking before we came on, is the whole job search situation and the internship situation. And it can take a toll on your psyche because you will hear a lot of no's. And there's the clumping your way through it in an unnatural way until you kind of get the swing of how to network and how to talk to people. And you're going to make mistakes. You're going to mess it up. But you know what? Now's the time to mess it up. And it's the network will work if you work it.
Okay.
And we have some amazing alumni who are willing to help the students. Students just need to follow through, and we have those connections, and we're willing to work with students. We want you to be prepared when you go do it. So that's a resource that we're here to help you with. But it does work if you work it. We're constantly revamping how we work with people.
So that leads to the next question, right? You think about coming out of a global historical pandemic, right? Which changed the way a lot of people's synapses work in their brain, people and organizations, entities in general, right?
Mine too.
Right, exactly. So coming off of that, if you were trying to get back to what you were before, you're probably going to run your ship aground, right? And so there's an aspect of, well, here's an opportunity for us to do a term that I like a lot, organizational introspection, and figure out where do we go from here. This is a chance to evolve, a chance to grow and reset. And just like you said, recruiters are probably going to be virtual from this point forward. So we got to figure out that. So I wonder about the direction of the department in terms of the evolution post-pandemic. Like for my class, we came in, the first year was virtual. I didn't learn a whole lot. It's partially my fault because I'm behind a computer for 4 or 5 hours there, you know what I mean? But there are aspects of that where everybody is trying to figure out, what are we doing here? What happens? We're all at home. Mm-hmm. Second year, we're on campus, which has been excellent from my experience in terms of, I'm like you, I don't want to stay at home. I want to interact with people. And so I imagine the experience for people who are first years now, as they go to their second year and then come out of their second year, will probably be a lot different than it is for us, which are the pandemic group cohort of the school. So I guess the question is, and there is the evolution of the department. Where do you guys see yourself going in terms of designing the future of this department, which benefits the students?
You guys are troopers, first of all. I mean, you guys you came in, I think everyone at that point was hoping we'd be on ground, but it has changed. It's changed everybody's perspective on it. And some people want that interaction every day. Some people want the hybrid. Some people want on ground. I'm, first of all, a believer in continuously evaluating how we can change things up to match student behaviors too, because that's always, when I said I looked at it from an operational perspective, I do look at behavior too, because I look at the behavior of who reads, who doesn't read, I look at the behavior of who interacts, who doesn't, who wants to go online, who's not going to, I think about all of those things as we're evaluating. From the departmental perspective, it has changed how we work. Everything we were doing was virtual. I suspect we're going to still have a lot of things virtually. But I wanted things like the career training. I want to get as much of that on ground in the fall as we can. We are going to do a summer virtual, obviously, because students aren't here yet. But I do want to have that because those relationships are so important. We're constantly revising it. The thing we're finding that honestly doesn't necessarily have to do with the pandemic is really working with students to help them better design their path that they want to go on. Our students, you have a handful that come in, they know what they want to do. We have some that don't. You don't have to know all the answers. This is why you're going to school. I mean, if you had all the answers, you'd be moving on to the next role. You wouldn't necessarily be in business school. Part of it is exploring. So we're working as a team to really define earlier that path with the students. Like, what is your career path? What do you want to be when you get out? How are you going to get there? How are you going to leverage the activities we offer as a student? So some our coaches have worked on developing almost like a working document, like a partnership document between the students and the team here, where it's almost like a mutual accountability that says, okay,
that's a great
you
idea.
want to go into finance. Okay, these are the things we're offering in finance. You should probably go to these activities. You should probably join this club. Here's some of these other opportunities for you. And so really leveraging that path to try to keep students, because the other challenge we run into once classes start as well, that academic, it's just time management's a problem. It's hard to manage all of those pieces. So even though I say, I try to look at it holistically, it's a lot for the students to try to manage all of it. And so really trying to figure out a way to help that process for the students as we help them work through the design. And so we have a template that our team's designing and going from there.
Kind of like a career design type situation.
Yep.
Yeah.
I want to change the terminology to career
Which
designing,
is important.
which is what we talked about. Yeah.
Which is important.
It's important because that's really what you're doing. Let's be honest. I mean, we leverage Zoom as best as we can, and there's definitely a place to make things easier using Zoom. But there is something when you're really trying to workshop something, getting on a whiteboard and drawing it out too. And so how do we merge those two together in a way that's effective for students as well?
Yeah, interesting. I'll ask a couple questions and then we'll wrap. The first one is about the coaches and the people that work with the students. This is an uneducated perspective because I never worked in the space. But it seems like there could be with certain students a heavy psychological aspect or psychology aspect to, like, this person doesn't know who they are or where they want to go. So this is just delaying them figuring that out. So I think while they're here, we need to be able to help them figure that out. And a lot of people aren't trained to understand emotional acuity and intelligence that way. So I wonder about, is that an aspect that you look for in the coaches you have here, or is that an aspect of the program in general, or is that just something that could potentially be a benefit to the program? Like, am I off base here in terms of that?
Well, it's funny. I have had some internal conversations as to how we could go really far into that. That's hard to operationalize, because where do you draw the line between a psychologist
yeah, right.
and a career team? But there is an element of psychology involved. And so that's part of that career pathing that we're talking about. It's not purely career pathing. It's also working with students to, as I say, the network works if you work it, but it can be demoralizing sometimes because you will hear a lot of no's. And it's just really kind of keeping your eye on the longer term versus the immediate gratification. Don't just look, I applied for 3 job internships, I didn't get them, it's over. And that's hard because you're like, well, this all matches up, I don't understand. There's a lot of competition out there. There's a lot of people also working for the same things, but keeping your eyes on what's longer term. And I think, there's definitely some elements of that we're going to try to work through to try to help kind of keep that perspective a little bit more clear for students. I think that's one area we can definitely help a little bit more. Also, don't feel that the first thing is the only thing. And honestly, you're going to stumble and mess up along the way. That's okay. You're a student. That's why you're here. You're here to stumble and mess up, and do it now.
I like to think that I'm a creative. I don't know if creatives would consider me a creative, but I like to think I'm a creative, right? Podcasting. Mm-hmm. I do some visuals and video work and creatively interviewing people and stuff like that. And a lot of us creatives, if they will allow me to be included in the group, a lot of us creatives do not want to be categorized. So you may have students here who have that type of creative mind state where it's like, I don't necessarily know where I fit, but I don't want to be put into it's hard for me to explain my value because the company is going to put me in this silo where they think I fit. And that's problematic for somebody with a creative mindset. So I wonder if that has ever presented itself, or have you ever dealt with something like that?
I also think that comes down to a fit question, honestly. To me, when you and I've mentioned this to you once before, I don't some people will operate better in those large firms that have very structured places. I honestly don't see that as you. I mean, I think you would rebel day one, and that's okay. That's a fit question, honestly. That's finding the right place for you. There's always a place for that. I mean, because creativity, think about it from a strategy, product development side of things, creativity is vital for that.
I agree.
But maybe you need someone to run the accounting in the back office. So there's places for all of it. It's just really finding the right place and the right fit. I mean, maybe you're better off at a tech startup that needs someone who can shoot all kinds of strategy. I mean, workforce planning. I mean, you think about people. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to think about it. That's just for fit and finding the right place. Maybe you need to continue working on your own. I mean, I don't think that it says that there's no place for it. I just think, once again, use your creativity to think about it a little differently. Don't put the pressure on you to go for one particular goal. There's a place for everyone.
Yeah, one thing I recently learned is a lot of that, especially for somebody with a brain that is creative, right, is all over the place, is actually understanding how to articulate your value. And that kind of helps you figure out where the fit is in terms of, it helps a person or company or entity that may have fit for you understand how they can put you in a company and then use all those creative skills. So I think that works.
But I think it's kind of, what are your strengths? I mean, you're strategic, you think big picture. You are invested in leadership. You are creative. There's some value points right there.
Right, put it out there. Right,
just put it out there. So, once again, it comes down to fit. You know, I mean, you figuring out, what is the best organization that you can use those to the best of your ability as well. And so I remember we had an alum, obviously no names, a number of years ago, was probably one of the most creative people I ever met. Structurally, it was one of those people I could very clearly see he could run a business, like he could create a creative business side of the business, but he would need somebody to run the business.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But if he had someone who was that polar opposite, dynamite.
It's interesting. And I'm going to say this, and I don't know if it's going to be true, but I think you're going to see more students coming in here like that.
But
because
that's awesome.
Of this social media thing, that they're able to do a lot of things, and so they don't necessarily want to be pigeonholed. So then you guys' job will be to help them figure out, let's pull the value out, and then we can figure out where you fit, just like you just said.
But that's actually a good thing too, is if some companies are going to want the creativity, that's how you grow.
Exactly. I agree.
Yeah.
The last question here is 20 years here at Pepperdine.
Almost 18, don't date me.
Okay, almost 18. I spent almost 15 years at a company, right? Yeah. I don't think I'm going to ever do that again. Think about long-term career planning. Nowadays, people just don't stay places long. I mean, higher education, I think people do. It's the nature of being on the campus. Some people do. So I wonder about that as students. Like, how should we approach long-term career planning? Like, should we even be thinking about 5 years from now? Or should we think about what we're doing now and what our final goal would be? Like, staying somewhere long just doesn't, I don't know if that's going to continue to happen in terms of...
No, it doesn't. Right. It doesn't happen anymore. I think there's different... I wouldn't think about it that way in terms of, I'm going to go to company X and stay there forever. Right. It's really thinking about what you want to do. With students, sometimes they get very caught up with the first role out of MBA program is the hardest one to get. So you get that role, but that's not necessarily going to define what you're doing 20 years after that. I mean, things are changing so fast. Your career could be different in 5 years. I still think you need to think about where you want to be in 5 years. So if you want to be a director at company X doing Y, that's how you plan that first job as to what would set you up for that, because that might be the thing. But as you start working, you may find other areas within an organization. You may talk to new people. You're going to see new things are going to happen in the world. Just be open that maybe you make a pivot later on. But once you get those experiences behind you and you get more value, and sometimes you want to make a complete pivot that's completely different. It's not necessarily a straight line anymore. I mean, it pivots, it goes ups, it goes down, it goes zigzags. So it's really thinking, okay, my role when I get out is one thing, but I'm really aiming for the 5 years out. Yeah. That's really where you should think about for that first job.
Exactly.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's where you're going to be in 5 years. And even if it is 7 years, you may be something different. And I think that that's natural. I mean, I've been fortunate. I've been at the same company, but I've been doing a lot of different things. And I've been very fortunate that I've had advocates that have helped me. But I think you're right. Most people aren't. I think if you have one, I'd be surprised.
Yeah, right. There's been somewhere. Yeah, that's interesting. Well, Diane, this has been an excellent conversation. I really appreciate you joining us here on the Business of Creativity podcast and kind of giving us an inside look on how the processes and systems that you have created since being here and how you guys think about helping us as students at Pepperdine.
Well, thanks. It's been fun. I meet a lot of great people every year, so it's great.
That was Diane Singel. She is the Executive Director of Full-Time Programs Administration and Career and Professional Development. And of course, this is Ty Brown with the Business of Creativity podcast. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today.